Recording. So here we're going to talk about some ways in which AI tools can help support Title II requirements. And just as a reminder, well, actually, before we get to the reminder, here's a way of getting access to the slides. You can either scan that QR code and it will give you the option of adding it to your Google Drive. It will make a copy of them. And it will also, or you could just type in that tiny URL and that should give you the same link and it will make a copy. Wait a minute or so for people to get them. Okay, everyone have them? Once. Okay. Now, just as a reminder, a little bit of background. I'm sure most people have been reminded of this many times and will continue to be for the next several months. But Title II has the final version of it has been released about a couple of years ago. And it requires that all state and local, in general, it requires that all state and local governments, including public universities, provide equal access to all services and provisions. But the most recent upgrade or update to this requires that all digital content, digital services offered by public, state, and local governments, including universities such as us, provide equal access to all individuals. And specifically, this time it specifies the standards that is to be met. It used to be somewhat vague, which gave colleges, universities a little bit of wiggle room in terms of what it was meant by being accessible. But now this specifies that the standard should be version WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.1 AA accessibility standards by April 24th, 2026, or in small communities, those that have less than 50,000 people living in them, I think, would be have an extra year to get to it. That applies to a few of the SUNY community colleges, but not very many because most of the counties are bigger than that. And one of the things that's different now is that not only does this apply to any work that college faculty share with students or post publicly, it also applies to student work. Anything that students create and share with classmates or share on the public web has to meet the same standards, as does any work created by student clubs and organizations, which may be a little bit tougher to get to. But it means that we're going to have to be not only making sure that our work the work we share with our students is accessible, but that the student work that is shared anywhere pretty much has to be by any college organization, including our classes, have to meet those same standards. So we have to be prepared to assist students a bit in meeting those standards. One of the main things added, one of the other things that was added besides a specific standard is that now this also applies to various web tools and so forth. So not only is it content, but any tools that are shared on a mobile device also have to meet these accessibility standards, which tightens things up quite a bit from where they were before. So, we've got a number of basic tools here for this. The main ones that most people have been using are Ally and Brightspace, where you can check the accessibility of any of your websites or any content in Brightspace. And that works pretty well. It will detect problems and give you suggestions on how to correct the problems. In Google Workspace, we do have, at Oswego anyway, we do have Grackle, which can be used with Google Slides and Google Docs and so forth to check for accessibility. And Microsoft Office and Adobe Acrobat both provide accessibility checkers where you can check to make sure that the content you created or that you're working with meets accessibility requirements. And the things where most of the problems are showing up in general with accessibility, and these have been longstanding problems, and we've done a lot of accessibility workshops, and the accessibility fellows have done a lot of workshops. But we're going to talk a little bit here about how perhaps AI tools might be able to address some of these and maybe allow us to solve some of these things a little bit more efficiently. One of the most common things is untagged images. That if you have any images, they could be graphs, they could, well, any images that are not purely decorative must contain some type of alt text. AI tools, by the way, ChatGPT can find information about untagged images. But an interesting thing happened. We did a workshop at CIT a couple of days ago or last week, where one of the people there was building an accessibility checker as a chatbot. And it was discovered that if there is an image just pasted into a Word document, it will not detect it. So we're better off relying on the official tools, Ally and, Grackle and so forth, because it assumed that anything that was not, let me rephrase that. If you build your own AI checker using pretty much any of the AI tools out there, or the common generative AI tools, if there's an image that is not referred to in the text or does not have an alt tag, it will just assume that it's decorative and not flag it. So that was an interesting thing we discovered actually just last week while doing a presentation on this. But this is the most common thing, and a lot of faculty have created content, put graphs up or scatter plots or other things that are relevant in their discipline without necessarily always having that text. And sometimes publishers' material was missing this. If you're using older material or content, most publishers' materials do meet this now, but it's not bad to check. Another thing is if we're creating slides or text documents, color contrast is another major issue. And hi, Sean. Another is no heading structure in documents. And this is especially true if you have some older PDFs, things that you either scanned in from documents you had access to, or old documents that you just haven't, that were done before people were aware of these tags. And some of those are being done still today. So we're going to look at some ways of doing this using AI tools. Multimedia without captions or transcripts is another common issue, much less common today than it was, thanks to all the work that the accessibility fellows have done on campus. But it still sometimes happens where people will just post an audio file or a video without that. And we do have some good tools to address this. So let's talk about how AI tools might be able to address missing or vague alt text. If you have a lot of alt text things out there, as an example, a few years back when we moved from Angel to Blackboard, this was quite a few years back, I had about 4,000 questions that I had created over the years that were all properly tagged, images that were all properly tagged. But when we transitioned from Angel to Brightspace, all of the images got separated from their alt text and from the questions that they were embedded in. And I had to spend much of that year rebuilding all that and recreating the alt text with, again, about 3,000 questions, each of which, well, probably 80% of which had image files had various cost curves. I teach economics. So there were lots of images that I had to reconnect and create the alt text tag. And that was a fair amount of work. And this is one of the things that generative AI can do pretty well. And a simple thing you can do is go into Claude or ChatGPT and ask it to generate alt text for an image compliant with WCAG 2.2 AA standards. And then you just attach the image and submit it, and it will create alt text. But you can also modify this a little bit. And one of the things I'm going to suggest doing is perhaps using a custom GPT. And this is one I put together just a couple of days ago to try. And if you have downloaded the slides, I'd suggest you try it. But before you do, let me show you where this came from. This is just a simple, this is when I was working on it. It's not quite working, but it's getting closer to working. We'll come back to that. Custom GPTs are basically chatbots that you create yourself. And I'm just going to show you this one to show you how you can do something like this. And we have a workshop on that coming up in the more distant future, which I think is tomorrow. But here, it's a very simple little chatbot. And I'm going to go into, I got to go into my GPTs to get to it, sorry. here, my GPTs, and the alt text generator. I'm going to edit the GPT. And here is the instructions for it. You could put in this as a prompt, but because this is something you might want to do multiple times, it's really convenient actually just to create a custom GPT that you can use as many times as you want without having to re-enter the prompt or go back into your chat history. Just asking ChatGPT to act as an accessibility consultant who assists college faculty in generating alt text for each image, ask it to create an alt text tag that is concise and to the point, which makes it a little bit easier, that focuses on the purpose of the image and uses descriptive words, but avoids the use of this is the image of or the picture of, which is, makes it a little bit more annoying if you're using a screen image or screen reader. And then it will display the image and the alt tag actually. Well, it will do that, but display the image and the alt text. This is an upgrade, but it was working anyway before that. Okay, my mother was calling. She does that. Okay, now.
You could have taken it.
You want me to take
It's
it?
mom.
It's probably a problem with her iPad or her phone. Okay, so now this has just been updated with a little bit more description. But if you go to the GPT now, again, if you click on the link there, it will do that. And now I've just created some images that I am going to. I just downloaded some images. I'm going to add from Google Drive, and let me see if I can find this. Where is this now? Well, let's see. It doesn't let me search it as nicely. So this is using AI to support Title II requirements. I just stuck the images. And why is the image not forming? Okay, well, what I'm going to do then is this. Let's try that again. There. Click on the plus sign, and I'm going to add photos and files. And there we go. So I just downloaded 3 of them, and none of them, well, 2 of them, sorry. 2 of them here, and I'm just going to select both of these, and you can select pretty much as many as you want. I'm going to open them, and it's now going to, when I click on here, it's going to send them to the GPT, and it is going to generate the alt text descriptions. Which isn't a bad alt text. You can always edit it, but and so it describes it as a line graph showing log annual wage by age across different educational levels, etc. And then a scatter plot illustrating a positive correlation between household income and car ownership in any town. This was just downloaded by quick image search for some graphs. And you could upload pretty much any image and it would give you, well, let's just grab something. What would we like to grab? How about an image of what?
Donald Duck.
Okay, Donald Duck. Again, as long as that's not subject to copyright, but well, for the purpose of this, I think we could just grab it and let's just see what it will do. We'll save this image as, oh no, it's a web page. Well, that actually would probably work, but I'm going to go to the page and then visit the page and then try downloading it from there because I'm not sure if it will take WebP, which is an appropriate web format. I'm going to save the image. And it's going to go to the download folder right there. Yeah, it's a ping image. And let's see if it will interpret that correctly. So we're going to go back here and we're going to add an image of Donald Duck. And there we go. Although the title may give it away, but let's just see how it does. Disney has prevented us from, there we go. So it doesn't do bad. And if you have hundreds or dozens of images, doing something like this could be really helpful, because it can be really tedious. And again, with those graphs, it didn't do that bad of a job in describing these things. It was kind of hard to see because they're kind of small, but here was the actual image that the first description was based on. And it provided a really nice summary of the content of the graph without, adding unnecessary detail. So that's what you want students, if this was part of information you were conveying, if students had visual impairments, what it described was pretty much the takeaways that you'd want them to have. So that's one type of thing that you can do with this. And again, if you're trying this on your own computer, just try uploading image and see how well it does. And if it doesn't, one of the nice advantage, by the way, of creating GPTs is that if it doesn't work as well as you'd like, you can change the directions. You could ask it to create something that's more verbose, or you could ask it to add more detail, whatever is appropriate to your interests there. And again, if you create your own GPT, you would just go in and add more detail to it, or you could, you could do it interactively. Well, that's the topic for another workshop, though. So we will close that GPT. Okay, I probably shouldn't have closed it because we are going to use that again. Sorry about that. But I can get to it pretty quickly. Okay, so that's one thing you can do. And that's a really tedious part of updating older materials that you might need to. You can always do it by hand, but if you deal with a lot of graphs, it can be a real pain. And if I had this back when we switched to Blackboard, when we downgraded to Blackboard all those years ago, it could have made things so much easier. Color contrast, the basic principles are not to use color alone to signal key elements in your materials. You should use high contrast colors and grayscale. Avoid red, green, and blue, yellow combinations because those are some of the most common, most difficult things for people with various visual disorders to detect. And here, there's really not much more that you need to do beyond using the basic contrast checkers, because Ally, Grackle, and Microsoft all have accessibility checkers that will do color contrast. I mean, I suppose, well, the one thing you could do, one thing you can always do is use the standard templates or create your own templates that already have the color contrast defined, which is probably the easiest. But if you don't like those standard ones, you could ask ChatGPT or other generative AIs to create a slide template that meets your specification while also meeting the color contrast standards, because those are pretty mechanical formulas to use. Basically, it takes the ratio of the background color to the or the color contrast between the background to the foreground color, and it does that with different standards for large and small text, basically. But again, if you don't like the default styles, but there's so many good styles out there now, this is probably less of an issue, and as long as you're using the styles, and you check those, you should be fine. Okay, this is one that I've been working on, and I thought I had okay, this is to add tags or transcripts from multimedia files. This was left over. But if you want to create tags on images, just do that as before. But if you want to generate transcripts at Oswego, the easiest way to do it is to use Zoom, Panopto, or YouTube. And they all use AI tools to generate transcripts, and they're generally pretty accurate. And you can always go back in and edit them. Otter.ai is another tool that you can use for the podcast that the T for Teaching podcast. We use Otter.ai. I have a paid subscription to it, and it's the same tool that's now built into Zoom. We were using it about 5 years before it was built into Zoom. But if you're creating podcasts, and if you're only having a small number of audio files, there is a free version. Well, the free version of it will allow you to do a fairly decent number of hours. When I've had students create podcasts in my class, I have them use the AI with a free account, and that's more than sufficient for them to, generate 2 or 3 podcasts each semester, podcasts of 15 to 20 minutes each typically, and they never have exceeded the free limit. And if they did, they could always convert it into a video file and upload it to YouTube and then download the transcripts. And that's pretty easy to do. And with video files, usually the transcripts are right embedded. But if you want to have a separate file with just a transcript, it's pretty easy to get that. But again, that's not directly an AI tool. It's just Zoom, Panopto, and YouTube are all using AI to generate the transcripts. Now, one of the other issues, and this is something I've been wrestling with a somewhat complex document, which was created in LaTeX a number of years ago, that has the headings all defined in terms of LaTeX, but they do not translate into a PDF, and that doesn't seem to work quite so well. So one of the things I've been working on, well, obviously, if you're creating something from new, just use the heading options in the tool that you're working with. And there's lots of support for that. Using predefined templates and styles in Word, et cetera, is really helpful. But you can also ask AI tools to add heading structures in slides and documents. And I do have something there that I've been working with, and I did just make a modification with it. It seemed to work really nicely. And this is another custom GPT that I created a couple of days ago. And it looked like it was working, but it turned out not quite. And I'm not entirely sure why. But let me just show you what it's supposed to be doing. And maybe someone will have some suggestion as to why it's not quite doing that yet. So I'm going to go to my custom GPTs. And here, this is the one I've been working with here. We're going to edit that. And here's what it's supposed to do. And let me make that a little bit bigger. Well, why is it not expanding? There we go. Okay, this is what it's supposed to do: to read a PDF document that's missing a proper heading structure and reading order, and convert them into accessible PDFs that meet WCAG 2.2 standards. It analyzes the content, usually by boldface and separate headers and so forth, infers appropriate headings and subheadings, and creates a new accessible that ensures the use of, there we go, the use of proper heading levels, H1 through H6, correct tagging, logical reading flow, and appropriate label of non-text content when available. When a user uploads a PDF, the assistant processes it and outputs a downloadable, accessibility compliant version as a PDF. And there should be a period there just for the sake of grammar, but it tends not to be very fussy about that. It will avoids reformatting the visual style unless necessary for compliance. It prioritizes clarity, semantic structure, and compliance with WCAG 2.2, especially section 1.3.1, 1.3.2, meaningful sequence, and 2.4.6. If information is ambiguous, it makes reasonable assumptions and notes changes for user review, etc. And so this is what I created, and I just made this was just a slight tweak of what I had there earlier when I discovered it didn't quite work like I thought. And so it's now there, and I'll update it just to get the grammar correct on the new version. And by the way, if you create a GPT, your chatbot, what it does is it will either create, or you can create these little things on the over here, which gives you suggestions. And if someone shares a GPT with you, it will give you these things, but you could also ask it, what can you do? And it will describe all the things that it can do. But it generally will, by default, provide you with 4 examples of this, which again, either the creator chooses or you get to choose. So I am going to upload this document. And I'm going to again go to add photos and files, and this should all be open. And this is a very simple unstructured document. And well, let me show you the document to show you just how simple it is. Here we go. It is so simple. It really contains virtually no information. It just has these boldface, topic 1, topic 2, and subtopic. And this has been saved as a PDF, and that is what has just been suggested there. I did this in about 30 seconds right before this, and I thought it was working. So it tells you what the problem is, and it suggests it uses the title of the document for the H1 heading, which is appropriate. It again finds it finds a heading, a header 2, which is appropriate for each of the topics, the A-level heads. And then for topic 3, it finds there's a subtopic because it was indented. So it infers this. And so it asks you if this heading structure appears correct. And so far, so good. And just say, let's say, yes, use this structure. And then what it will appear to do is do this, and it's going to very quickly do the conversion. This is not going to be a very complex conversion. And it tells you what it's done. It's used a clear hierarchy. It tells you what sort of corrections were made. And then it tells you how to check it using Accessibility Checker in Adobe Acrobat Pro or another accessibility checker, which is all great. And it looks like it did a nice job, right? So we can select that, and maybe it'll work this time. And I have no idea why it did this. This is new. This did not put this on Google Maps before it just said, I just got the error message. So I don't know why that happened. But apparently the sub shop is popular there.
That's what I was gonna say. Why is the sub shop
so
big?
in any case, I don't know why this isn't working. It seems to be whenever I tried it, and I haven't tried it for very long, it looks like it's working. It knows what it's doing, but it's not putting the document in a place where it can find it. And I have no idea why. So
Can you
not
ask it something like, can you read the PDF you gave me to me?
Okay, yeah. So let's say
It'd be interesting if it thinks.
so. It has found it. So I guess you could copy and paste it in. Is that HTML? I don't know. So it thinks it did it. It seems to be having trouble mounting the file that it created or finding where it saved the file.
I wonder if it's reading the HTML tags and thinking it's a web page because it's putting the H1 tags.
Well, no, that's what it was asked to do.
Right, but it might be reading as HTML. And
how about this? Let's say save this. That's a very good point. As that may very well be a problem, the issue. And there it is. And that has fixed it. Okay, so let us go back and revise. Thank you. Because it looked like it was working. It was so close to working. So let me go back then, and I am going to go to let's close this and go back to GPTs. And so this will create an HTML document that you could then copy and paste, say, into Brightspace if you had a PDF there. And actually, that would probably be a better, because I didn't make this one public, but I'm going to now edit it and then just make this change. It will then, where is it? Let's make this larger. An accessibility compliant HTML version. well, HTML format. And we don't really need downloadable because it would just be copied and pasted. And I think that will do it. So we'll close that, update it. And so now you have an accessibility PDF. Well, that's not the best name, but in any case, now it should take any format that you give it and convert it into an accessible PDF. Now, for something like that, you could probably have done that pretty easily just by tagging the document in whatever, using header 1, header 2, or whatever, or
Mhm.
but if you have, say, a book, for example, that is not accessible because it's not tagged, doing this perhaps in small chunks, because there's probably a limit on how much it can do, might be an interesting application of this. So those are really the only things I had here. Just, for the most part, we've got some really good tools, but there are some tasks like creating the alt tags and perhaps converting complex documents or complex PDFs that were not properly tagged into a taggable format would be useful. And in this version, it's actually more useful because the most accessible content is HTML. So if that was added into Brightspace, we'd have something that also now would be much more responsive at design, as well as meeting accessibility requirements and having tags. So, this is a type of task that can take time.
Are there other websites, like, I guess I'm looking AI websites that have these kinds of tools, or like, is this something like you've been working on, obviously, because it's fun?
Well, it's not so
but
much
also-
because it's fun, but I do
But it
have
is.
like a 700-page book that I have to convert that
Oh,
that I've been checking for several years on how to do it without manually
without
rebuilding
doing
it page by page in WordPress or something else, in Pressbooks or something else. And this might be it. That's why I've been working on this specifically.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't found it. When I search
But
for
do you
it,
think this could
maybe.
start?
Maybe. I don't have it. Well, let me see.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with my book is it's also using math symbols, and it's using a lot of graphs and other things, and it's also really, really long. And so my plan was to move it over to a Pressbook this summer, but I've been trying to find a way of doing this. And I thought this had it, but that's exactly the issue. It was trying to create HTML tags in a PDF, which is not what PDFs use. And it probably could be modified to generate a PDF using, if I hadn't asked it to use that heading structure, it could have been just using the heading structure within Adobe. And I'm not sure how Adobe tags things. So any questions or does anyone know of any things that might do something like this? Because this is a type of thing that faculty often run into. They'll often have old scanned documents that were converted into something with a text layer, but the text layer is generally not going to be tagged appropriately. And that's one of the things that we really need to do to work with reading screen readers, basically.
What about hand-drawn imagery that was then photographed and then loaded in PNG or JPEG form?
I haven't done anything hand-drawn in a document in probably 20 years, but it could be. Mike, do you have any images that would do that? Michael, do you have?
Let's see.
Because that would be a really good test of that reader. And it does a pretty good job. I mean,
Well, you gave an example yesterday of reading it, some handwritten notes, and it translated it for you. But if it's a diagram, maybe it will go and create alt text. I mean, that's the question, right? To
Exactly,
create
yeah.
alt text of a hand.
Yeah, and it should. I mean, it does a pretty good job of, AI tools do a pretty good job of doing this.
How about John, have you looked at any, since it's Michael asking, like mathematical symbols? Has it done anything around mathematical symbols, even if it's giving like beta, epsilon,
I have a lot of work that it will generally read that okay, but
And
I'm not
create an
sure what
alt
it will
text?
create. I haven't tried alt text because most of my stuff was done in MathML, so it was already in a mathematical format,
okay, so
formatted
it
for the
would go
web.
and it'd be able to go and translate it.
Yeah. And Brightspace, and many other modern tools out there will allow you to enter things in MathML or LaTeX, because Brightspace will read LaTeX and that will generate all the equations in a nice accessible format. Older work though, if you have images of equations and things, it is handy to have that capability, and it should do that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it from like the math faculty who are going and creating, even if it's just overheads, and then going and
then trying to convert that into
convert them,
right,
like
rather
if we
than
had
just
a
posting
tool.
an image of it.
Right, which is inaccessible.
Yeah, I have a picture of a graph that I drew and gave my students and said, this is the graph of the derivative of a function.
Okay.
Can you answer these questions about?
Could you share the screen
Yeah, and
and
then we'll take a
try
picture of it.
try that PDF? Well, or you can try that,
Try his ChatGPT.
the image generator thing, or just upload it
Let's
directly.
see. So here's the picture,
Okay.
and so would I
Yeah,
like,
so see if you can save the image.
okay, image.
Oops. Okay, there.
Edit image.
No, I think that just lets you change the.
Yeah. Let me see. Can I copy and paste the image?
Maybe if it's not in edit mode.
Yeah, actually, if you look at it in a student view.
Student view.
Oh, well, because in the question pool though.
Well, it's in a question pool, so it won't show up necessarily in the
Right.
student pool if I do it.
Can you just copy and paste? Can take a picture of the screen.
Yeah, taking a picture of it would work.
I have my
Or a
Mac.
screen.
Like a screenshot?
A screenshot, yeah. Are you using a Mac or Windows?
PC.
Okay, what is the command to do a snipping?
I don't-
There's a snipping tool in there.
Yeah, just type snipping in the search bar.
Yeah,
Search bar.
because it would be interesting to see how it interprets that.
Save options. Save as a copy, or should I copy it to clipboard?
Save as a copy, I think.
Okay. Is PNG okay?
Yeah,
And then can you save it in Google Drive and share it with you, and then you can load
well,
it
or
into
you
your
can try it
ChatGPT?
directly. If you click on that, did you download the slides?
I did. Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. So yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
open ChatGPT and let's see if it works. Or go to the slides and click on that link to the image alt text generator.
Okay. Well, I downloaded it onto my phone. Is there a way to?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, if you could send us the image, we could try it. If you could drop it in chat.
Type message there is. No, that's the whole screen. I need.
Oh, it has a whole screen. Well, try it.
Let's see if I can just copy this. Copy to clipboard. Paste in the chat. This.
No, I think it has to be a file to pay. Oh, no, there it is. Okay. So I'm going to download it here. And then I'm going to go
Stop
over.
sharing.
Yep, you can, yeah, stop the share and I will. Why is it telling me to update Windows? Okay. This Windows is far too old to update, or this computer is far too old. Where did the GPT go? Is it on the screen? It should be. Well, let me share that screen. There's screen 2. And did I close it? I would not have closed it. Apparently no, here it is. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go over to, that's something different. Let's go back. ChatGPT. Sorry, I did close it. And it recognizes me, and I'm going to go over here to GPTs, and I am going to go to my GPTs, and I'm going to go to the alt text generator, which apparently I was too lazy to generate an icon for. And I'm going to now upload the photos and files from now. This was in downloads, should be in downloads. Okay, because I didn't save it. Okay, saved. And now, there we go. Okay, so now let's just see what it does with it. Yeah, because this would be an issue for, if you're just doing handwriting, with a dot camera. Let's see what it will do. How's that?
Wow.
So what do you think, Michael?
Pretty. Almost. It's
It's not
some
a
of
cubic
the
function, but
where it says the x-intercepts are a little bit off. The x-intercepts are at 6, -6, -2, and +2. That could have just been my handwriting though. And it calls it a cubic function. It's actually a quartic function, but that's not really all that important. But
it's a little sloppy in its interpretation, but
it could be that I just need to learn how to draw better.
Well, or and you can edit that. It's something.
Yeah.
It's a great start.
It has one extra turning point there.
But yeah, that's pretty good.
At least it gives you a general format that you could then edit and place in, in the alt text.
Mm-hmm. Right,
and you can correct
there are a number of questions in statistics and math courses where it's like, take a look at this picture here and tell us what you think of it. And I had a blind student about a year ago who I had to basically come up with a different version of the question for that student. So
yeah, sometimes accommodations are needed with some types of questions.
Yeah, it's close, but it's just not. It just has that -6 and -7, 7 are really 6, but
yeah, but that type of thing is correctable. At least it gives you the basic structure of alt text that meets the type of guidelines for alt text tags.
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot of work getting it up there, but once you've done it once, you
Yeah.
know, it'd be a lot, I mean, it's just copy and paste.
Yeah,
after
just
that.
snip the thing, save them, and
Yeah.
generate it if you're going to be posting them.
And then I wonder if you teach it, like, the correct answer, if it'll do better in the future, like, once it learns your hand.
Well, and what you can always do is you can go into the text, into here, and edit the GPT, and then you can ask it to be more careful when interpreting graphs or other things. And, you know, when Judy Littlejohn and I gave a workshop on this at CIT, not on this one, this was just created a day or two ago, but she was asking it to serve as a syllabus assistant and basically letting students query the syllabus for due dates and things. And she had 3 things due on one date, and she asked it what was due on a specific date, and it gave one of the 3 things. It didn't mention the others. And then she said, when are these other 2 things due? And it responded with the same date. And she said, have you learned from this? and it said yes. And then from then on, it worked. So you can train the GPTs. So, you know, in this case, when it generates that text, if you're the person who created the GPT, you can edit it basically and have it learn to be more careful with specific things. And that will also be true when other people access it. So, you know, it is trainable. I mean, that's how they work. So. Okay, so so again, you know, most things we have really good tools for, but for some repetitive tasks, we don't. And it requires a lot more hand effort to retrofit or correct old materials if you didn't do this from the ground up. And, you know, using a generative AI might be useful. And I haven't found any really good tools to do the heading structures automatically. There may be some out there, but that's a good question. I will look some more.
What do you think are things we should be exploring as we head into our new IITG grant around AI and accessibility?
There's so many, and that, I mean, that's going to be the big question, right? Like, which direction do we go? Because I think there's so many potential avenues that we could explore. And I mean, I wonder how much of that IITG, like that section of it, is going to be talking about accessibility sort of like in general, and making sure that people have a base, not right, like a base knowledge to kind of go off of
Accessibility
in general
to begin with, and then
Yeah.
you need this AI.
Yeah, because you can't create AI tools to address
if
accessibility
you don't know
without
what
knowing.
it is. Yeah.
But again, a nice thing you can always do is refer to the standards, because that's in their training database.
Mhm.
And if, you know, there's other things you wanted to do, you can always upload information to it.
I think the accessibility program through IITG is going to have a lot of homework. Like, I can imagine there being a lot of supplemental information there that they
Right.
will have to kind of look at and review. But I mean, it's a cool kind of like partnership already. If John's custom GPTs, you know, if you continue to kind of improve them, I mean, those would be a great addition to sort of have in a good collaboration.
Yeah, but you kind of need this whole creating the tools aspect, which is what I would see from the grant. And then there's a whole component of teaching them how to use these tools.
Yeah.
Which
I'd say even giving them the tools to identify what has to be corrected,
Mm-hmm.
like ally, having it check that. And
But we want people to be working with the AI tools and building their own type things. And because that was one of the things I ran into here, we do have good tools already for
Mhm.
diagnosing the problems,
I'm
you
just
know,
saying, if they need to check their own documents.
right, to find the
to
problems.
find what they need to correct, then they can use the AI
Mhm.
tools to correct it.
And that was going to be one of the things we were thinking about exploring, was looking at sort of like doing like an evaluation of different kinds of multimodal AI tools, and like considering accessibility as you evaluate, and then thinking about things like cost, inclusivity, et cetera.
Yeah, the bias.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot, I think, I'm really not sure, because there's a lot of different ways that we can run it. It's a great question. Thanks, Sean.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought I was gonna get all the answers there.
It's
Well, again, the image generating thing works pretty well, and it's a really simple command to do it. And the only reason I did it as a GPT is just because it's something
Yeah.
you might use over and over again, you know. Because whenever you create new content, you have to do that. And this is one way of doing it without manually trying to come up with definitions for all these things that meets the usual, you know, that are simple, that are direct, that can extract the essential information. Okay, any questions? Okay, well, we'll
Just
stop.
one
Oh, go ahead.
one question. Yeah,
Sure.
just one question about the I know you were talking earlier about how AI is already being used by, I guess, Zoom and Panopto for like captioning video and everything.
More.
They seem to be fairly accurate, but how often should we be prepared to, like, just go back into Zoom, Panopto, and these other AI generators to edit the captioning ourselves? Because sometimes
In theory,
I'm
every
recording an
time.
yeah, I'm recording an entire 45, 50-minute lecture, and I'm talking the whole time. So that's a lot of editing to go back in and comb over every single word I said in 50 minutes to make sure that and 4 lectures a day, sometimes
Yeah.
that's a lot of editing.
I know when I create a podcast, it's typically about 40 minutes, and we generally have really high quality audio going into it. It normally takes about 2 to 4 hours to edit it, just to get the sentence structure, to edit the transcript.
But I see you're using Grammarly. Is it like?
Oh, no, because you
But
want
is it a good time? Like the first time
Grammarly was
through,
just here, but no, because Grammarly would not help, because we want it to be an accurate transcription, and people don't always speak in grammatically correct manner. So you would not want that running, because there are sometimes issues with tense or the wrong words or the wrong subjugation of verbs and so forth. And you want it to be accurate,
Yeah.
Could you upload it into ChatGPT to tell it to fix the grammar?
I haven't tried that, partly because, well, one of the other things I'm doing is I'm also doing a final pass edit on the audio, because one of the things that happens is I will edit the audio first, and then there will still be a few repeated words, for example, where someone will say this, or they'll repeat a word, but there's enough of a pause, so when you're editing it second by second, you don't notice the repetition, but when you see it in print, it's easier to do that, so I edit both. So to be fair, that's also partly audio editing time, not just text. But one of the things that often gets wrong is the sentence structure, because it's trying to string complete sentences out in ways that are grammatically correct, but that's not always what was meant by the person. So, where the periods go, where the semicolons go, and where the commas go, that AI doesn't always do that correctly, because it's assuming that people are speaking grammatically correct English, which is not always the case. Run-ons, for example, are pretty common in speech, but they're, it tries to correct those in ways that are grammatically correct, but they don't always make sense in terms of the word. So they're not there yet in terms of that.
I'd also add, like when you're looking at summary of a meeting that comes out of Zoom, those should be checked every time, because often there might be multiple people in the room and things are attributed to the wrong individual.
Whoever is on this. So everything said here will come with my name on it.
Yes.
And in theory, that should all be corrected. And if we had a team of like
depending
3 or
on how
4 people,
important, well, it depends how important it is. But if I'm sharing meetings of minutes of a meeting,
you want it to be
I
accurate.
want it to be accurate enough. I mean, if it's just for my own personal notes, but then it's also still good to know who said what.
One nice thing about Otter, just a plug for Otter.ai, is it will identify speakers. And if you use the same speakers in multiple files, it will do it correctly 98, 99% of the time. So Rebecca and I are always correctly identified, and returning guests are correctly identified, which is kind of nice.
It's great.
Okay.
So, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop this one, and thanks for stopping by.
Okay.
Thank you.